Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Thaddeus Mitchell YouTube channel and podcast. Today, we're going to go over 5 reasons not to care what people think and how to still value people in the process. And so, this is a few reasons and ways to decrease depression and anxiety from a biblical perspective. So, the fact is, most modern people seem tired of hearing about sin, and I think maybe if we have the courage to look at what sin is from a different perspective, maybe that would be helpful to many people. So, sin could be defined as missing the target, and guilt and shame are a product of depression and anxiety, which arises from unresolved sin. So it's unresolved emotional wounds or physical or spiritual wounds. Maybe you're not even aware of these things, but unresolved sin can be defined then as a kind of false love of a personal psychological prison, that which a person may or may not be able to foster the ability to free and forgive oneself for the actions that have prohibited one's own spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical growth as a human being. So that essentially sums up the description and definition of depression and anxiety in biblical terms, let's say. The first reason is an increased confidence, courage, and magnetism of positive outcomes when it comes to not caring what people think, but still valuing them. So I have a couple biblical verses here to look at and to evaluate, and we can go from there. So the first is from 1 Peter 5:8. It says, "Be sober and be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." And the second verse is from 1 Corinthians 15:58. It says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain of the Lord." So there's a couple things I want to point out here. Number one is what the meaning of to be vigilant is. And vigilant is defined not in the Bible, but in the dictionary as keeping careful watch for keeping careful watch of possible danger or difficulties, on the lookout, and concentrating. So, be vigilant and be sober. Aim for what is highest and ask for the universe for serenity and that which you cannot change. That's when it comes to the work of the Lord, I think. It becomes a manifestation of goodness, and it becomes a manifestation of just, I think, honesty and integrity when it comes to working for the Lord. And when you work for the Lord, I think it's a soulful work. It's more about, it's about personal, keeping watch of personal dignity and being aware of how courage can actually exemplify the outcome of any situation. There's a quote by Terence McKenna. It says, "Nature rewards courage." And I think that's true, because when you're bold and brazen, at least in my experience, And I was not a very bold person a long time ago. I was very shy. I was very not outspoken, but I always did feel like I would be holding my own flag. And something that I learned from holding my own flag was just when you're being true to yourself, you attract that quality of what you're seeking and what you're searching for automatically. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that when you hold your peace, you don't need to give attention to those who do not want to see or hear you. So when you don't care what people think and you are able to hold your peace, then you're able to distinguish between those that want to lift you up and those that want to make you feel small. And so here's a couple verses from the Bible that I think are relevant. And I didn't bold some of the parts of the verses that I'm referencing on the screen here for all of the visual viewers, mainly because I think the bold text outlines more what we're looking for, but I'd still think that it's relevant. The non-bolded text is relevant. But from Isaiah 32:17 it says, "And the work of the righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever." And from Matthew 7:16 through 18, it says, "Ye shall know them by their fruits. And a good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit." So, what I think this means essentially is, can the people that you surround yourself with can they, well, how do you say it? Are they capable of showing humility and a kind of humbleness and gratitude? Or are they more trying to push their views onto you? Because if you're around somebody with an open mind, and by open mind I mean just capable of receiving information of all different kinds without being an enemy to those ideas or thoughts. So when it says in Matthew 7:18, it says, "A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit," and neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. I think what this means very plainly is that you can do well and do good, and good things will come, and you will reap what you sow, essentially. And in Isaiah, the part of working the work of righteousness shall be peace. It doesn't mean, at least in my understanding of this, it doesn't mean that the righteous or those who are righteous are incapable of harm, but they have the discipline to act and bring forth clarity and not confusion, really. So that's the second reason. The third reason is you're able to release attachment to outcomes and still be motivated by compassion. So in Psalm 34:13 through 15, it says, "Keep thy tongue from evil, and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry." So I had to look up what guile means the first time I read this verse. So anybody that is also looking for clarity on what this means, I put the description here. It says guile, sly or cunning intelligence. And essentially, to me, it translates as deceitful speech. So kind of a lack of integrity or honesty, I would say. So when you're able to release attachment to outcomes, you're naturally going to seek peace, and you're naturally going to want to do good in the world. And so compassion allows you not only to become the best version of yourself, but it also allows you to forgive yourself for past mistakes. And in forgiving yourself, you learn how to forgive others. And so learning how to still care and have compassion for people, even if they are not wanting to do good, still caring for them and having that compassion, because everybody in this world suffers. Some people are just better at hiding it, right? Like or they're just able to project it onto other people, and they simply just neglect themselves, which doesn't really help anybody. But when you're able to have compassion without being attached to the outcome, when you're able to give love without the need to receive it, that, I think, is where it says here, the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous. I think that's what it means, is when you're able to give that love without the need to expect it or receive it in return. So reason number 4 is you're able to discern who you can and cannot choose peace and wisdom with. So in 2 Corinthians 13:8, it says, "For we can do nothing against the truth, but for the truth." And in 2 Corinthians 13:11 through 12, it says, "Finally, brethren, farewell. Be perfect, be of good comfort, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace shall be with you. Greet one another with an holy kiss." And to me, I didn't know what a holy kiss was. Like, I intuitively understood what it meant, but for some reason, there was a part of me that instinctually I felt there was something deeper to it. And so I did a bit of research on what a holy kiss was, or what a holy kiss represents. And I came to the conclusion, essentially, that a holy kiss can simply be an expression of endearment to show brotherly or sisterly love to one another. And I think what this is saying is that those that deceive you will refuse to acknowledge your wants and needs. And those same people that do not live with peace in themselves, well, they're not going to understand what it means to be of one mind, or to be perfectly imperfect. And good comfort, I think good comfort here more relates to how would you say? I think good comfort relates more to just the ability to understand where you're at in your life and to accept it for what it is. And so my final question or final response to these verses would be, well, would you expect one who does not have oneself? So if you do not have yourself, well, would you expect you or someone else to act or speak truthfully if they do not understand or have that peace within themselves? And I think this comes back to compassion, right? I think it comes back to forgiving somebody for, well, for their sins, for missing the mark, right? For this is full circle. It comes back to being able to understand what it's like to miss the mark, and to remember the hardships that you went through before you were able to get to a place of peace within yourself. Because sometimes it takes a lot of inner work and a lot of inner adjusting to reach a point where you can relate more profoundly with yourself, I would say. And I think that when you're able to discern who you can choose to have peace with and who you can choose to have wisdom with and who grants you insight, I think that's a very powerful thing, because then you're able to be aware of, well, who you can negotiate with. Because if someone isn't going to acknowledge your wants or needs, well, how are you going to negotiate with them? And isn't negotiation one of the most important factors in any relationship, whether it's business or personal or family, any kind of relationship? If you are unable to negotiate and to compromise, I think that would be very difficult for the relationship to sustain itself. And so finally, the last reason not to care what other people think and still value them is you're able to let what is dead rest and allow those lessons of love to always be with you. So in Matthew 6:21 through 23, it says, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness?" And so Jesus is speaking in this verse here. And I want to follow that with something that I read in Modern Man in Search of a Soul by Carl Jung. I did make a reference to this book in the previous video that I made. I've just been reading this book, and I found it very inspirational, and I think what he says here really has a lot to do with this passage in Matthew. It says, "It is no easy matter to live a life that is modeled on Christ's, but it is unspeakably harder to live one's own life as truly as Christ lived his." I think that's there's a lot to unpack there, but I think that's a very profound statement. Because, well, when you confuse memory with intelligence as you process emotional wounds, it can do more damage to you than it can harm. And I know this based off of personal experience. I know that when I was so caught up in the story of what happened that I couldn't see the whole picture. And when I couldn't see the whole picture, I noticed that, and this took some time, of course, but when I didn't see the whole picture, I noticed that there was a part of me that actually still held resentment, whether it was for abandonment or neglect or any of those small things where I felt like I wasn't heard or I felt like I wasn't seen, which all of us have those kinds of experiences. But for me personally, when I confused my memory with the broad scope of things, I actually did more harm to myself than I did good. And so what I would say here is that we probably don't want to repress our wounds, but it is not always best to reopen them as well. Because when reopening a wound, like let's say you have a scab, and if you keep peeling the scab, it's never going to heal, right? And sometimes the wound, like let's say you have a surgery. One time I had a surgery for my appendix removal, and I mean, I still have the scar there, right? But that's what it is. It's a scar. And the scar itself can be healed through time, but a scab, if you keep pulling at that, it's never going to heal properly. And I think that's what Jesus is saying here is the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. So if you see the whole picture, you'll understand with a kind of certainty of your situation. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. And so what I think this is saying is that it's difficult to say what this is saying because there's multiple interpretations that I can think of off the top of my head, but perhaps the most significant one that I can evaluate off the top of my mind is that if your body is full of darkness, then that means that there's just still things that you have to work through and to process as well, I would say. But this last sentence here is pretty interesting as well. It says, if therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? So once again, let what is dead rest. And sometimes there is darkness within us all where it's sometimes better to leave it as it was. And that's not to say that we should intentionally ignore it or intentionally repress it, but to be able to look at it and say, that was that. Well, I think that takes a lot of courage and love for oneself, and it also inspires insight, I would say, and faith in oneself as well. So there are your 5 reasons. Well, there are 5 reasons, not your 5 reasons. Your 5 reasons may be different from my 5 reasons. But what do you think? Why should we care about what people think? Or is it best to have more of a stoic mindset and not care as much of what people think, but still value them? I want to know what your thoughts are and what your opinions are. I hope everybody has found this informative and somewhat entertaining. I would hope as well. And with that in mind, peace be unto you all, and may blessings come your way. Hope you have a good rest of your day.